Now, is it true that you got hired because of a letter you wrote to Linda McMahon?
Yeah, well, yes, absolutely. I wanted to get in the wrestling business, like I just told you. I was doing a wrestling radio show on Long Island that I was funding myself. I was running out of money, and I thought to myself, man, I'm going to be dead in the water here if I don't do something. So I said, you know what? Let me write a letter to Linda McMahon. I was smart enough not to write a letter to Vince McMahon because that's who everybody wrote to. So I'm like, let me write a letter to Linda McMahon because she probably gets few. So, I wrote a letter to Linda McMahon. I sent it to her. I had the idea that Linda was, from a business, structure, was really oversaw the magazine at that point. I had no idea. So, luckily I sent it to Linda. Next thing I know, Linda herself called me back. And that's how I got the opportunity to become a freelance writer for the WWF Magazine at the time.
Do you remember what that letter said?
I just was honest about my situation. Look, I'm Vince Russo. This is what I'm doing. I've been a big supporter, of your company for years. I'm running out of money. I'm just looking for an opportunity. I mean, I just basically shot straight, and I got a call.
And while you were there with the magazine during that time, there's that 3-year period, like 93 to 96. Where you had some great wrestlers with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and Undertaker, but the creative was kind of atrocious at that time, and you saw wrestling just kind of in a big decline. Working for the company, what were your thoughts? Because in a way, you're almost on the outside looking in, because you're working for the company, but you're not involved creatively. What were your thoughts of the company during that time?
I was exactly what you said. I was on the outside looking in, and as a wrestling fan, I was so embarrassed by the product. I was embarrassed. It was hard to watch. I couldn't watch it. And in the meantime, this NWO thing was going on at WCW, and they were heading in the right direction, and we at the time were stuck in the 80s, and there was no movement. And at that time, as a wrestling fan, it was really, really embarrassing for me, the type of product that we were putting on at the time. I mean, that's not a shot at anybody. That's the way I felt at the time.
Yeah. And what ultimately led you to making that transition from the magazine side to the creative end?
Well, what happened was, we started the Raw magazine, and the Raw magazine became a shoot magazine. It wasn't fluff and, the writers making stuff up that wrestlers were saying. It was a shoot magazine where, for the first time, I was going out there and talking to the wrestlers about what was going on. I was also, in the regular WWF magazine, I was also shooting my own angles because what was happening on TV was horrible. So, I'll never forget, when we started the Raw magazine, I actually wrote an interview with Bret Hart where we talked about Eric Bischoff and WCW. This is probably 95. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. I got called up to Vince's office, and, back then I just didn't get called up into Vince's office. And I remember he had the magazine, and with one arm, he cleared everything that was on his desk to the floor, and he screamed at me, "What the hell are you trying to do? Are you trying to put me out of business?" And it's so funny because I remember the moment vividly where I should have been scared to death, and I probably should have been fired on out, and that's what I said. And for whatever reason, I wasn't fired, and we did have that conversation, and I didn't back off. And then it was maybe 6 months later when I got called up to his office, and the ratings were really, really bad, and he had all his I don't want to use the term minions, but I don't know what else to use, but he had all his minions sitting around the table, and I walk into the room and I'm thinking, okay, the ratings were horrible last night. He needs a scapegoat. He needs to make the grandstand. So I'm going to be the scapegoat, and I'm going to be fired in front of all these people. I mean, that's what I honestly thought, and I was okay with it because partially because the product was so bad at the time, I was unhappy, and if that's what he was going to do, then that's what he was going to do. But he did the complete opposite. He had the magazine in his hands,